And can you tell me about your upbringing?
Distinctly socialist. You know, I was born in Sheffield and spent my first 8.5 years in the house in Sheffield, which we visited years ago. Then my dad was very unhealthy.
Yeah.
He was I mean, people say when I say I was an only child, so I was probably spoilt. With my mum, there was no hope of that. But I think if it had been, I think my dad might have. I'm much more like his family than my mum's. And in appearance and in some cases in abilities.
You told those people in the house that you remembered some of the Sheffield in the war.
Oh yes, I do. Well, where as you know, I was born just a few weeks before war was declared. And according to my mum, I slept through the Blitz on Sheffield. When I mentioned that to John Platts, he recited the date of it because he was born in Sheffield.
Right.
And he in fact was at a men's meeting in the middle of Sheffield when the sirens went, apparently. Right. So he actually remembered, and he said, because they sang God Be With You Till We Meet Again, which we had at his funeral, which I think is rather nice. Anyhow, I can remember if we wanted to go into town, we went by tram. We had to go, because our road, as you know, was a cul-de-sac and avenue. I can remember waiting for the tram in Fitzallen Square, which is in the centre of Sheffield, next to what to me looked like lots of doors. As a small child, we'd call them hoardings these days, obviously round a bomb site, and they said, let Burton dress you on them. So presumably it's been a Burton shop that had been bombed. Right. And I can remember literally travelling on that tram back to where we lived. You went through the Wicker, which is where the water runs, or where it is actually that is an old Sheffield saying that where the water runs over the weir in English. And in fact the river, very thin, River Don runs through the middle of Sheffield, and was just before there you pass, I can remember seeing bomb sites where there'd been shops, quite big shops. And our bit was very much residential. We didn't have any bombing in our part of Sheffield.
And your parents designed that house, did they? Didn't they?
Yes. They before they were married, they designed it, but then they got of course had an architect pointed out the sort of minor details that you wouldn't have been able to get out at the top of the stairs and things like that if they'd have built it to that plan. Lived in that house for my first 8.5 years, and I went to the local infant school at first, but then, I mean, that had only been just towards the end of the war. I can remember I was actually at the local infant school on BE Day. Even I, with my very socialist parents, had a red, white and blue ribbon. And we went into the middle of Sheffield, and there was an illuminated tram. Of course, seeing anything really brightly lit up was a real treat, because everything had been, I mean, shop windows weren't lit in the evening or anything, because everything had to be blacked out.
And you had a special ration card, didn't you, because of you being vegetarian?
I had a special
Ration card.
not ration card, it was a ration book.
Ration book.
Yeah, I ended up being, well, in those days when I was little, they used to dose babies on cod liver oil or halibut liver oil. I won't give you my mother's description. Shall we say my insides couldn't tolerate it, with rather unfortunate results. So they said, erroneously, I now know, I might grow out of it. And so I actually had my ration book I've still got the remains of a ration book with the cancelled stamped on the bacon. I think I had an extra cheese ration for it, but so that's why I had to be. So I had to be vegetarian, and but that's not really important to me in my life. But then at the end, my dad was very unhealthy. I can remember several spells of him being in hospital, and my mother had given up teaching when she married, because in the 30s Sheffield wouldn't employ married teachers. They wouldn't get away with that now. My Uncle Alan was my mum's, the younger of my mum's brothers. She was the oldest one, which I think of as the excuse for why she was so bossy. But he was actually, I've again still got a postcard sent by him at early 40s on sick leave in Cairo, because he was driving a scout car at El Alamein, and Uncle Arthur, I did know he was about some of the time. They were both teachers, of course. Everybody was. Uncle Arthur, in fact, was officially in the fire service. But then they probably, I mean, the way I heard it was, they found out he could draw maps. He was actually a maths teacher. And they found out he could draw maps. And so we didn't officially know where he was. He was in Sheffield some of the time, but I think he was somewhere Brighton way. But one of his, I think it was his son, my cousin Stephen, in much later years told me, I said that was what I knew about it, and he said yes, he wouldn't have been able to tell you the maps he drew. He believed were for the Dunkirk landings, the Normandy landing. Yes, sorry, because I wasn't old enough to know about those when they were happening.
So your dad would have been too unwell to fight, wouldn't he?
He was a hunchback, and he was actually an air raid warden, which is why I really find it annoying when they make fun of air raid wardens. But in fact, I have been told since, I mean, I don't think he told me at that time, he said with all the blackouting, they must have had some very good tracking, some very
navigation.
good maps and things because of Sheffield, because he was actually an air raid warden when as we had a blitz. I think it went over 2 days and he said the second night they took up almost to the inch where they'd left off the night before. And they did actually bomb, and like all the stuff the Russians are doing these days, they didn't, there wasn't very much bombing residential places. Our area wasn't touched, the area where we lived. But,
so
facilities, things like, I don't think they actually did get any of the steel works, because I know they were, because of course they were, that's why the Sheffield got a blitz, because of the steel works that normally made cutlery and plaques and things like that were making armaments. I was 6, a couple of months after the war finished. It was 1945, so I was 6 in the July. And they were desperately short of teachers, because of course none have been in. Some of them, men teachers, have been away, away to do with the war. And there'd been very little, if any, teacher training. And my mum trained at Sheffield Training College in the 20s. And so, as I say, my dad was ill quite a bit at the time. And so, I don't know how much. I mean, I wasn't old enough to know a lot about it. But she went back to teaching at a school which was in a fairly modern council estate. I mean, I think it was built just pre-war. And, well, with my dad not there all the time, and her teaching, I couldn't go on going to the local school. And so I had to go to the school she was at. In fact, I was an age I should have been in her class, but she wouldn't have me.
That's not what she told us.
No, but no, she didn't think it was right.
Yeah.
And I agree with her. I'd been in school where a child of one of the teachers, or even the head, was at the school, and that is not healthy. It's not satisfactory at all. It wasn't very nice with her, one of the teachers. It was a bit awkward because the other children, it was not sort of what you might call upper class housing estate, shall we say. It was a big modern, it must have been built in the 30s, I think, housing estate built to rehouse people from the slums. When they cleared slums, which I believe they did some of in the 30s, they built this new housing estate, and it was so I went to school there. Southey Green it was. The posh private housing end of it was Parsons Cross.
And your dad, did your dad work for the co-op then, or?
He didn't. Never worked for the co-op in Sheffield. He was a director. It was of the Brightside and Carbrook Cooperative Society, but that wasn't his job. His job was he was a solicitor's managing clerk, and he actually got his qualifications for the law by. Because he wasn't able to stay on at school at all, and so he went to WEA evening classes, Workers' Educational Association evening classes, and got some law qualifications. And then I think it was really officially for the sake of his health. Somebody told him to get out of Sheffield. Of course, Sheffield was much more polluted then. They make all this fuss about pollution now, but sometime after that we had the Clean Air Act, and in fact you had to burn smokeless fuel. You weren't allowed to burn the things that made all the smoke. And I can remember Uncle Alan being very proud, I suppose late 50s, that you could look from one of Sheffield's many hills, you could look down into the sort of main part of Sheffield, and it was all clear, not foggy. You know, there was wasn't all the smoke. And because he was very involved with the co-op, he actually got a job at Chatham Co-op. He was Education Secretary of Chatham Co-op, because of course the co-op is a movement, not only a shop. It was actually his office was on the top floor of Chatham Co-op, but Co-op ran young youth clubs and quite a lot of educational type things.
And what year did you move there?
No. We actually moved into the house in Hempstead, 1948, April 48. We moved out of the Sheffield house, February 48. But I think my dad moved first. He lived in lodgings, just, you know, when he got this job. He lived in lodgings in Chatham.
So he died that same year though, didn't he?
He died at the end of that year. That's how much the moving to healthier climes did to him. But he died of a cerebral hemorrhage, so that was nothing to do with all the stomach trouble and such like that he had. So
so did you move to Hempstead straight away? That was where you moved into?
Well, actually my mum and I also stayed in this lodgings, because my parents bought that house as it was being built, and we had to move out of the house in Sheffield because of, you know, that we sold it and they wanted to move in. And so in fact my mum and I stayed with Auntie Patty, I think, at one point. She was my dad's oldest sister. Didn't discover until a great deal later that her name was actually Martha. That's how it went in that generation. And Auntie Patty and Uncle Percy.
So you were 9 when you moved?
But I was 8 and a half as we moved down to Kent. and my mum and I stayed at this same lodgings in 17 Pattons Lane. It was just at the point where Chatham and Rochester sort of overlap. Pattons Lane, one end of it. The end of it we were in was Chatham, and the other end was Rochester, believe it or not, goes into City Way.
Okay.
And then, so we had to stay there until our house was quite dried out. We had the same thing with our house in Farnham Close. We couldn't move in until it had dried out.
That's new. Mm.
And Raynham. But they actually bought it new. And so we moved into that house then. And I went to Twiddle's school. Not to Hempstead school, which, had we moved straight there, would have been logical. But my mum didn't want me to have too many changes of schools. So I went to Twiddle School because I could get there from the where we lodged in Chatham for that first couple of months.
Mm.
This is February to April. And
your mum got a job there, but that was later, was it?
my mum actually did some supply teaching. She was actually, when we first moved, she taught at Borstal School.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they were desperately short of teachers in that soon after the war. There was a great shortage of primary school teachers particularly. And but then she was at Byron Road School in Gillingham. Byron Road being off Canterbury Street, in the bit of Gillingham, Poets' Corner. Nearly all the roads are named after poets. The only one I really know is Byron Road, but that's where she was. She later my dad died very suddenly, just a few days before Christmas '48. In fact, I was there, my mum wasn't. Not when he died, but she'd go out shopping. It was just, the schools were broken up, so she wasn't teaching and I was home. And but I was playing with children next double one, I think it was, and my dad called me and asked me to call the doctor because he'd got a very severe headache. He was taken to hospital, and my mum asked next doors to have me overnight. So I slept there overnight, and when because he was in All Saints Hospital where you were born, and didn't survive the night. And of course Mum came home and picked me up, naturally, and had to break it to me that he'd died. I'm afraid I, at the time, wished that if one of my parents had died, it had been my mum and not my dad. But, excuse me. So, well, she went more or less straight back to full-time teaching after that. And so I was at Twiddle Junior School.
So is that when she was teaching in the Raynham High Street?
No. She got the headship later.
Right.
She was teaching at Byron Road.
Right.
I don't know whether she was straight away then, but Twiddle School at that time, it was a 30s built school round a quadrangle. And in those days, the infants and juniors were in the same building and there wasn't really room.
Right.
So, and they didn't have any school lunches.
Right.
So she got permission for me to have lunches at Hempstead school. And so I used to have to cycle home from Twiddle and go to Hempstead to lunches. And so I was at Twiddle school. The first couple of years at Twiddle school I'm not thankful for, because when I was first there I was in Mrs. Sargent's class. Well, she should have been retired. She was ever so old. And there were 50 of us. Well, you cannot teach 50 second-year juniors properly. It's just not practical. and as I say, she was terribly old-fashioned. When I'd learned Marion Richardson writing in the school in Sheffield, which was very ahead of its time. And she said, that's not real writing. You had to do all the loops and everything. Well, that is not easy. And so I was in her class at that first couple of terms, I suppose. And then went up to Mr. Candy's class. And he chucked me out because I wasn't quick enough. I've never been quick and careless. I've always been very, done things very thoroughly, and I've never been quick. I can remember when Robin once, when we were walking, said, "Come on, Kay, quick." And I said, "I don't do quick," and you said, "We had noticed." And I was there for, after that, I think I only suffered one term of his class. After that, I suspect it might have been as my dad died, over Christmas. And I was in Mr. Farrow's class, who was much nicer, and I, in retrospect, believe was probably a Christian. He taught us Psalm 100 and Psalm 23, and was a much nicer person. He lived in Marshall Road in Raynham. And then next I was in Miss Hosnell's class. When I went up, the next year. And Miss Pook and Miss Horsnell were a long way ahead of their time. They did team teaching in a way, that, in the sense that if, somebody needed a bit more, then the one of them that was good at that particular thing would have them. I was in Miss Horsnell's class, but went into Miss Pook's class for some things. and they ran brownies in the school. And I can remember going on outings with them, which again is not a thing that was done much in those days. And I went to both, and I don't know which was with officially from school and which was officially with brownies, but we definitely went to Penshurst and Knoll, which I wouldn't have got to go to otherwise. Because of course very few people had cars in those days. I suppose they must have had a coach. They actually, when David and I were first married, and we lived in Raynham, they actually still lived in Raynham, next to where the library is now, and they in fact lived on there was, when I was at Twiddle School, there was Romany Road, which was unmade up. Well, by the time, as I say, I was an adult, it was made up and you could get right through. So they must have had to walk along the unmade up part of Romany Road from where they lived. But I can remember being a brownie and learning. I promised to do my best to do my duty to God and the King, to help other people every day, especially those at home. Right. And then, as what we call the 11 plus, the was entirely speed, but timed, and it was just, well, intelligence test, whatever. I failed the scholarship, which I am greatly thankful for, because I would have gone to either Chatham Girls' Grammar School or Rochester, Chatham County that was known as, or Rochester Girls' Grammar School. And instead I went to Woodlands School. Well, again I remember the teachers there. The first class I was in was Miss Black, and she again, I'm pretty certain, was a Christian. She was a very conscientious teacher. She did the Greek legends and those sorts of things with us. That's the main background of that sort of thing that I have. What her really speciality was music. We had an orchestra which used to play for assembly, and I learned the violin there. I was never very good at it, but at least, we did, play in an assembly. And the French teacher was a much better musician than she was a teacher. Miss Coshall, she was called. And because the French she taught, we learnt all the, verbs by rote. Je suis tué, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. And she actually had a piano in her classroom, and she taught us some of the soundtrack of Snow White. Well, I've remembered something I left out, which I should have said. When I was at secondary school, a friend who'd actually been a friend at junior school, at Twiddle Junior School, was in the same class as me at Woodlands at the secondary school, and she told me about a girls' club that met on Friday evenings, and which of course turned out to be Covenanters, and I went to that, and they used to have, at that time, they had the weekday meeting, the Friday evening meeting at the church, which was the sort of hut with a corrugated iron roof type thing in a field between Twiddle Lane and East Court Lane. And we used to have I think they had the Sunday services there, and as I say, we used to have Covenanters there. But the Sunday sort of Bible class they had at the usher's house. Mrs. Usher did that. She was comic, and it was from Covenanters. They had what they called Covenanter camp. It wasn't a camp, it was actually in a girls' boarding school in St Leonard's next to Hastings, and I went to that, and whilst I was there they used to have talks, meetings and things, and in fact, as I arrived there, one of the officers, one of the ladies that ran it, said to me, was I a Christian? And I said, of course. Are there some people here who aren't? Thinking there must be some Muslims or Hindus or something there. But I found out during the course of the various talks there that wasn't the point, that you needed to actually become a Christian. You needed to ask Jesus into your life, and it just didn't seem to work. I did pray that the Lord would come into my life, but I hadn't got the assurance. And then a man did one talk about, based on Revelation 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in and be with him. And he said, it doesn't say I might come in if you open the door. He said, I will come in. And we know if Jesus says something, that he means it. And so you can, if you do ask the Lord to come into your life, he will come in. And I prayed that prayer then. And because of that talk, I had the assurance that it was so. That was the 20th of August 1953. So there. I was 14. I'll be 84.
Yeah.
Yes, it was 70 years ago this year.
Did you tell your mum?
In a way, but of course she didn't accept it.
No.
In fact, as I got older, I had strict instructions not to marry a Covenanter, because that, you know, sort of labelled me Christian.
Yeah. How did that work out for you?
Right. Now then. Right, we had actually got to when I was at Fort Pitt. Maths was always my best subject up till then, but then I got really into French. I think mainly due to Miss Marsh, who was the first French teacher I had there, who I liked very much, and she was a good teacher. Whilst I was there, my interest in French developed and I got better at it. My school friends there, the people, other Christians that I got to know, our RE teacher suffered rather, because I was basically brethren, having become a Christian through Covenanters, which was based at a brethren church, and Anne Hogman was at Snodland Anglican Church, which the Church of England church was, which was quite an evangelical Church of England. And Diana was at Strood Gospel Mission, which was just round the corner from where they lived at that time, was Diana. And Margaret, who you have met, Margaret Hanger, she was, whose parents had actually been missionaries in Bolivia.
She became Margaret Roberts.
She was later Margaret Roberts, yes. Married in 1965.
So was there a Christian Union at your school?
No, not in the school. We didn't have any clubs or anything in that sense, but we had what we called a Scripture Union group. We used to actually meet at on, I think it was Friday evenings, at the Presbyterian Church, which was bottom of Fort Pitt Hill. Okay. Don't think it's called that now. The church is still there, but I think it's gone astray a bit. We used to meet in a room at the back, not in the actual church. So, yes. Actually, I was saying our scripture teacher our RE teacher at Fort Pitt suffered rather, because she was Miss Cornwall Jones, who I now know. I know she came from Faversham.
Oh, okay.
She was to come by train from Faversham. She lived at 1 Britain Road.
Oh.
She was still there when we moved to Faversham. I mean, she wouldn't be still alive by Miss Cornwall Jones she was. And she went to, I know she, her church was the church which is rather high church at Preston Church, as opposed to North Preston, which is a rather grassy council estate. And it was strange, because we always said grace before lunch at at school dinners, because nearly all of us had to go to school dinners, because it was the only girls' technical school for a very wide area. I think there were 2 people went home home to lunch, Diana, because she was so fussy she couldn't have school dinners. Vivian Cook, I think she was, who lived on Boundary Road, which was just below the school. But we used to say grace. Heavenly Father, we thank you for these and all thy mercies. Please bless this food to our use and us in our thy service. And then I never heard it that grace anywhere except there until what was the name across the corner from us? In
Faversham.
In Faversham. I know it ever so well, and John and
I can't remember the name.
Their daughter
Yeah, I know who you mean.
lived in their house there.
Diagonally, sort of across.
Yes,
The
the corner house. Oh dear. Anyhow, she actually took me once to the women's meeting got me to go with her to the women's meeting to Preston Church.
Oh, well.
And they said that grace there,
Oh, okay.
which I found really interesting.
Oh. Oh,
It was quite a nice women's meeting, actually, not. Anyhow, so I progressed and went to.
So did you start going to church after that Covenant camp?
Well, yes. I went to. We used to have the actual Covenant meetings. They had the new church building, which is there now.
Yeah.
Built. Shortly after that, I suppose. It must have been during the late 50s.
Right.
It was built. And in fact, I at one point went to. It was always awkward, of course, living in Hempstead.
Yeah, it's a bit of a way, isn't it?
It's not a long way, but it's. Hempstead buses were once an hour and 2 hourly on Sunday. I did cycle. So I don't know, don't know what to go on to. I went on to, as I say, as you did O levels, and it was before GCSE had the S in it. There were GCE, O level and A level. So I went on to do O level. French, maths, English language, English literature, which you did separately. I actually did general science. Unfortunately, it was general science, which was physics, chemistry and biology. So very good, but the problem was only starting at that school at 13. There were all sorts of things we hadn't done. You know, they sort of build up to those sorts of things. And biology I was no good at because you had to be able to draw, and I can't draw. Physics and chemistry I did quite enjoy, but it was too late to be starting to do them. You know, you needed to the background to them, doing them only in about 16 or... And...
But you went off to Durham to do your teacher training.
Well, no, I actually applied to for university. So I wanted to do a French degree or a languages degree. But the trouble again was that to do a language degree you needed to have done Latin.
Didn't
well,
have
we
Latin.
We didn't have a course for Latin at all at Pulpit. And the reason I know something about the teachers at Chatham Girls' Grammar School was because I actually went there for to do Latin, but it was too late to start learning it. I mean, there's just too much to learn. I am quite convinced that the Romans did not speak the Latin that we learn. It's not speakable. Much, much too complicated. What we had to read De Bello Gallico, which is about the Gallic Wars, by Caesar, I believe, one of them. Of course, I didn't get a good enough grade in Latin to be able to go. I was actually provisionally accepted at Sheffield University, but I'd got to get a higher grade in French and get Latin. Well, I didn't pass Latin at all. I hadn't learnt enough Latin to be able to pass it O level. And French, again, I'd started doing seriously, but too late. And my objection to language teaching in this country is that there's much too little just language. Had the exam been French language, full stop, I would have got a good, I know I would have got a good grade, but you had to do literature. And the literature we studied, most of it was the French classics, which are ghastly. Greek tragedies rehashed into archaic and artificial French. One that I did enjoy was The Barber of Seville, which is not by Rossini or Mozart. It is by Beaumarchais, and we read that as one of the set books. Another one we actually read, I don't know whether it was really part of the course, was Cyrano de Bergerac, the one with the big nose. There's been a film of it in more recent years. That was great fun. It really is fun. It really is fun now. Oh, we read La Barre by Molière. But so I didn't get into university, so I applied for teacher training colleges. Had interviews at 2 or 3. One was Salisbury. And it was, I think it was a Church of England college. It was practically on the doorstep of the cathedral. And the woman was more interested in, the woman that interviewed me was more interested in what sort of church I went to than my academic qualification. So I think I would have got in there, but I'm glad I didn't. That's not what I wanted to study. And I also had an interview at Southend, which convinced me that Southend is the most boring place I've ever seen. It was out of season.
Is it in season?
Well, it was out of season, but anyhow, I didn't go there. But then I had an interview at Durham, and in fact, I'm very pleased because I heard, that I got the interview at the time whilst I was actually at the NYLC holiday centre in Eastbourne, and the main people in charge, Christians in charge of that, were Fred and Mary Wood, who were among the founders of the NYLC, National Young Life Campaign, to give it its... And actually Mary Wood prayed with me because I literally went from there up to Durham.
Oh, okay.
I trained, and she prayed with me before I went. And I went up there and so got into Durham, well, Neville's Cross College it was, on the A1. And Neville's Cross is actually a crossroads where there was a battle at the time of the between Scots and English, fighting over where Scotland started roughly. And going up there, I'd expected the accent to be sort of like Yorkshire, only more so. It wasn't at all. It was nearer to Scottish. It's Geordie, which is almost... It's... Well, if you listen to people that are really Geordie, why, aye, man. I had to learn the language to do doing teaching practice. Please, miss, yes, miss. Please, miss, no, miss.
That was 2 years?
It was 2 years, yes. In those days, it was 2 years. In fact, I think we were the last that it was 2 years. So you only had a teaching certificate at the end, not a degree. But in fact, it was mostly a very practical thing, and I think the best lecturer we had was Miss Lane, who was Scottish, and she was psychology and education, but she was a teacher. She used to illustrate a point by wee Johnny at the back.
And that's where you met Joan Robinson?
John Robinson was there. In fact, there were a group of us that were accepted late, in most cases because we'd applied to university and not gone, and so we went. In fact, our college was a college of the university, but we weren't university students as such. Right. And she educationally could have gone to university, but she literally had a physical condition that stress made her ill. Yeah. She just I can't remember what the results of it were, but she just, if there was something where there was a lot of sort of mental stress, she was, she became physically ill, so that she couldn't do it. But she did end up teaching maths in her old in the grammar school she'd been to as a pupil. She's the one that when we visited her, she'd made a cake and she said, "How many degrees do you want?" And wouldn't accept a bit. Yes. But
so then you moved back down to Kent afterwards?
Well, I haven't lived there. I only lived in college.
Yeah.
And there wasn't all this, having to find. In fact, the first year, those of us that had got in at the last minute for that sort of reason, I can't remember how many of us there were, but Ruth was one of those as well. Lived in the College of Agriculture. They actually built a new block at Neville's Cross, and some of us were in that,
right.
And others of us after that first year were in the main building. But I say we lived in the College of Agriculture because they had more men students than women students, so they got spare women students accommodation. That was Hoffel, spelled Houghtall. Yes. So we used to have to catch the bus up to college, and said bus to college, into the town to the college, from there past the prison, just as a matter of interest. Yes, so I was at college in Durham, and then of course moved back home to Hempstead, and applied for jobs in Gillingham, but Gillingham being a slightly nicer area, didn't have as many jobs available, and Strood being most of it a bit grotty. They needed teachers, so I was at St Mary's School behind the station in Strood, which was, I think, has now been pulled down. It was very old.
But did you get the bus there? At what point did you get your moped?
Oh, that was when I was going to Paris.
Okay.
Oh, I actually had...
What year are we on?
Well, it was 1960 when I left college and started that job September.
Right. And what year did you go to Paris?
And then I was there just for a couple of years, and then, in fact, I was moved. The head was, she'd no right to have had a head chip. She hadn't got the experience. When it was infants and junior girls. The boys had to go. Boys could be in the infant school there, but had to go on to a different school for the juniors, which was ridiculous.
Right.
And so I say I was there for a couple of years. Well, they hadn't a clue about the younger end. She wasn't a good teacher, and she criticised everything, and I was, in fact, they had, because you're on probation for your first, or you were in those days, if you were only just a training college. Your first year was called probation. You had to complete it. I think it was years probation. Well, a local inspector came in and I was literally moved to Elaine Avenue, which was a very good school. Mr. My friend Audrey you met, she said having Mr. Woolligan as a head spoiled you for any other head teacher, because he was such a nice person to work for. And he loved children. He's the only teacher I've ever known that actually referred to the kiddies. You know, and the children loved him, in fact. But so I taught there, and having been one of the last to only do 2 years training, our year group could fairly easily got onto courses for teachers, you know, to sort of extend our training in a way. And I applied for a 1-year course, French course for teachers, and got on it and went to Paris. The course was appalling, but it was nice being in Paris for a year. And while in Paris I lived in the Cité Universitaire, which here you'd call it the university campus. But in fact there were no lectures there or anything like that. It was just accommodation, but it's a really interesting place because it has houses of different countries. You know, students, you had to sort of prove you were a student to be able to get accommodation there, but we were nowhere near all of us at the same place or doing the same studies at all. Frida, I got to know, was did teach French. She was from Derbyshire, was it? Anyhow, I heard that she died whilst I was expecting you.
Oh.
So, from her mother. Yes, my friend Frida, but she was a very good friend. But I think it was Brimington or something like that was where she lived. Anyhow, and
So had you done any French in your teacher training course, or was that just teacher training?
Well, my accent deteriorated whilst I was in college. The French lecturer hadn't ever bothered to go back to France to keep her accent reasonable.
Okay.
So that it was we did have I did French as my main subject.
Yeah, so you did.
But I didn't really learn much French there. No, I did French and history. As my subjects.
Okay, so Mum, you were came back from Paris 1965.
June 1965, I, of course, officially went back to teaching because I was seconded for a year. I was seconded on salary.
So you went back to
and
the same
somebody
school.
else had my class for the whole of that time, but that was a bit confusing because I mean just that last month of term or thereabouts, I think Mr. Wilkinson gave me jobs to do, mate. Either that or I shared with somebody.
Oh, what you mean? You came back just before the end of the school year?
It was just, yeah, well, it was literally end of June, which is the end of the school year in France.
Right, yeah.
Because they finish earlier.
Yeah.
They have a much longer summer break than we do. Yeah. And so I got back, as I say, literally with about a month left of the summer term. So I was officially back at the school, but I think, I'm not sure whether somebody had my class full time or what happened, because I had a class for the first bit of the autumn term in 64,
right,
and then went to Paris and was there for the whole school year, really,
right,
except just that last month, which was a bit odd. So I was back in the school officially, but
so in that time that you've been away, Dad had moved to Raynham.
And then I went back to going to Twiddle church, of course, and I I qualified for YPF in those days, being 1965, so I was just 26.
Right.
That July. And YPF, there was this new young man who I thought was younger than me, incidentally.
Right.
I now know better, but we mostly knew each other there. In fact, some of...
So is that a weeknight thing? Was that after church?
No, it's after church fellowship.
Right.
After church fellowship on Sunday evenings.
Right.
We did do some activities, sort of bank holidays and things like that.
Yeah. So Dad lived with Nanny and Grandad in the bungalow?
Well, officially, actually, they lived with him because he was paying the mortgage.
They paid the
deposit. It was a bit difficult, that.
So that was 1965 you met him then, so...
Well, actually, he was going out of Nettie at the time.
Right. Was she also at the YPF?
Yeah, she was at Twiddle and
right.
was at YPF, but I was friendly with her, incidentally, and she had a scooter. She also had a beehive hairdo, which didn't fit very well under a crash helmet.
Right. Okay, so what happened next?
She chucked him because she lived on Robin Hood's Lane. We've come to the conclusion, talking about it later, she was probably fostered. Either fostered or adopted.
Oh, right, okay.
Because she was in some ways a bit insecure.
Right.
She
a bit of a scatterbrain, I think.
Well, she was no intellectual. She worked in Cheeseman's in Maidstone.
What was that?
The shop a bit like one of those that probably ended up Debenhams.
Okay.
There was Cheeseman's in department store. Riceman's was in Canterbury and opposite the bus station. And Cheeseman's was Maidstone. And the Fevers in Gillingham.
Okay, so what happened next?
Sorry.
Right.
Well, actually, the first time we ever actually went out together was when I wasn't romantic type going out. We went to a series of meetings in London. Where was it?
Was it? I don't know. Westminster Chapel was it?
I think
Westminster Hall. It was somewhere there, a big balcony, because we were up there once.
And we saw Auntie Lou.
Uncle Lou and Winnie and the other side.
And in fact,
so what kinds of meetings
Len
were there?
gave us a...
What sort of meetings were there?
Oh, there were a series about something or other.
Probably about saying come and being brethren.
Alright.
It was definitely a brethren type
Okay.
series of meetings, and
Okay.
as he says, we saw Len pre-Janet.
Okay, yeah. Because they got married. Did they get married after you?
Yeah.
Quite a lot after, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, Winnie had wanted a Triumph, which Len drove, and he took us to the station from this meeting. He had a clue of his way around London, in spite of living in the area. I mean, I knew which way we ought to go to get to Charing Cross station, which you did. That Charing Cross was what you came into mostly from Gillingham in those days.
Oh, right, okay.
I mean, I knew my way round pretty thoroughly from, and this must have been 66, in fact, because I bought my Mini very beginning of 66, and so I thought, well, we might as well go by car.
Right.
So we went by car, and
So was that a group of you, or was it just you and Dad?
no, just the two of us.
Oh, right, okay. Right. And
Yeah.
how did it develop from there then?
Well, we just sort of got to know each other.
And then we thought we might as well just about get married, so we did.
So those things you had in common.
Well, we went to at least one Billy Graham one,
Oh, right.
which was I think in Welsh with subtitles or something like that.
But the subtitles were in Welsh, yeah.
Yes, but we went. Was it before we were married? We went to those magnificent men in their flying machines.
Right.
It was very funny, as you
I was
know.
laughing so
You
much.
must have seen it.
I'm not sure if I have.
What? Oh, you must watch it. It's got just about every comedian there was about at that time, in it. Harry Thomas, Tony Hancock,
Oh,
and
right, okay.
a lot.
So you got married in 1968.
Yes, he passed his test on my car in October '67, if I remember rightly.
Okay.
Mum said, if you can drive, you can drive my car if you've driven before, but she said, I'm not going to teach you to drive. So I got a book, learn to drive in 2 weeks, and followed that.
Well, I told you, I didn't teach you to drive as such, because you had driven before, but
yeah, sort of.
the technical, so
Okay.
it's not the technical side of it, but I did told him there were the things you had to do
Yeah.
that you had to do in the tests. I mean, that's the main thing, is because you have to do 3-point turns and
all that.
the knowing what you didn't have a written one in those days. Came a lot later, and but you had to do emergency stops and field starts and things like that. I did all that in Chatham, which has some very nasty hills.
Oh, Chatham does have some very horrible hills. So, Ruth was born, what month was Ruth born?
Don't ask. 1st of October.
So she was born in October and lived how long?
A few days.
What was her birthday?
1st of October. Just about got in before Grandad's birthday. He was the 2nd of October.
Ah, 1st October, okay.
1909.
Okay. And do you know what was wrong with her?
Yeah, brain damage from birth. The doctor didn't get
It was a very difficult birth. So she was late.
Right.
She was at home and the doctor didn't get her to the hospital in time. Midwife was there, she got there first and the doctor came. She was saying the doctor ought to get her to hospital, but she blamed the doctor because she said he should have got there earlier. And she was delivered by forceps, so which probably didn't help her. And that's why Mum didn't want you to be delivered by forceps when you were a long time coming, and they would get coming along with the forceps to get you out, and you popped out anyway.
Right, and then Joan came along. So that was what year was that?
Joan was early.
That was 1968, wasn't it? So
Joan was 1970. You were 72.
Yeah.
Yes, Joan was born in 70, but in fact, I was going to, I was hoping to have her at home as well, but then I used to have to go for antenatal appointments at All Saints, and the last, I went one time when she was actually about due, on midwife's reckoning, and I wasn't putting on weight, so...
But you couldn't keep anything down, could you?
No, well that's my hiatus hernia. I mean, each time I was pregnant with both of you, I said you'd come out with marrows for bodies and rubber beans for legs, because that was about all I could eat. Well, the thing is, the hiatus hernia makes me not be able to ever eat much at once, and there wasn't room for the baby and food. Oh yes, I had egg beaten up in milk. No, I didn't like it, but I'd got to have something to feed me, and to feed it.
So Joan was born by caesarean.
Yeah, I wasn't supposed to be going to be. I suffered actually the worst of both worlds, because it started me off because she was due the way they did, and so I'd had the uncomfortable bit of that, and then I'm eternally thankful to a coloured nurse who examined me. She probably was a midwife, she certainly was a nurse in that bit, and she examined me carefully and discovered that Joan, she got herself at a bad angle, so could have been damaged both herself and me. She and so I was they because of that, she sort of reported that, if you like, and I was taken into and had a seizure.
So when you got married you were in Raynham. Did you were living in Raynham? Twiddle. Got married at Twiddle.
I was living in Hempstead, and he was living in 16 Chalky Bank Road, Raynham.
Yeah.
With his mummy and daddy.
You got married in 68, is it right?
Yes, March 68.
And then you lived in the bungalow or not?
We lived in the bungalow. They rented from then onwards. So said Dad was paying the mortgage. The mortgage was in his name anyhow. So. And it was only a 2-bedroom bungalow. Barely that, I mean, they weren't even big ones.
So when did you move to Farnham Close?
We were it must have been, we weren't in the bungalow that long, but having, because of course the baby, that first baby, Ruth, was born whilst we were in Chalky Bank in the bungalow, but as it was likely that we were going to have other children, we obviously needed somewhere where there was room. And
what we didn't know at the time was that Grandma was planning to move into our bungalow and swap it for her house.
Grandma was?
Yeah, when she retired, but we might have stayed on a bit longer there.
Right.
But she didn't tell us until afterwards.
So Farnham Close, was that a new build when you moved there?
Yeah. We couldn't move in until it was dried out.
Right, yeah.
It's funny, my parents did that when we moved into the house in Hempstead.
Yeah.
Again, we couldn't move in until it had dried out because it was so new.
Yeah.
And it was rather interesting because it was within even my walking distance, Farnham Close, of where the bungalow was.
Oh, was it? Oh, right, okay.
It was just the other side of Station Road.
Right, okay.
Just below the railway.
Yeah.
We were of course, Farnham Close was below the railway, but it was slightly more below, but the other side off the other side of Station Road.
Right.
And so we looked at quite a number of places.
And where's Grandma driving by then? When did Grandma pass her test?
Oh, she passed a test before I went to France.
Oh, right, okay. So she was driving?
So, yes.
After fashion. Yeah.
She shouldn't have ever passed.
So you're in Farnham Close, in Raynham, is it? Raynham?
Farnham Close was just the other side of the Station Road at Raynham from Chalky Bank, which went across the other way. Across towards Gillingham, if you like. I mean, Raynham is officially comes under Gillingham.
Chalky off to going down from the station. Chalky Bank's on the left and Farnham Close on the right off Waiting Road.
Is that near the granary, Mary?
It's very near the granary, isn't it?
Yeah, the granary's at the station. It wasn't.
That's where I used. The granary wasn't in use at the time. It was, I think, more or less derelict. I'm not sure.
It's an old farm
that's where I used to meet him from off the train.
It's an old house, wasn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, the granary is only the what they call it these days. It is an old house. Immediately below the railway. I mean, you can see it from the stage, isn't it?
So come
down near the stairs.
1972, you've got 2 little children now, in Farnham Close.
Yes.
Yeah. And what happened from there?
Well, yes, as I say, we moved into that house. In fact, we could choose sort of colour schemes and things like that, because some things were automatically put in because it was an estate.
Yeah.
It was a modern build.
You couldn't have any sanitary
Oh,
wear
yes.
apart from pink.
Oh yes, all the in the whole of our small estate, everybody had a pink bathroom and downstairs toilet.
And we had, you could choose the towels, they were either pink or cream.
And you could choose, you know, to some extent the colours of walls and things like that. For people with young families, it was a very well designed estate, because of all the new houses built on that, every house on the estate had a garage. They were in different various places. Ours was the bottom of our garden. Others were in blocks at the end of their little close. Every house on the estate had a downstairs toilet. Now, when you've got young children, that is extremely useful. It means other people's children don't have to go up to your bathroom.
That's probably quite a new thing then as well, because I don't think the previous sort of generations didn't build downstairs toilets, did they?
We looked at a house by the same builder.
Yes.
Peak Construction.
Peak Construction it
And
was,
they,
which I think was
owned by a
firm.
teacher at Grandma's school, wasn't it, Mr. Dybel?
Yes, the Dybel.
Who was?
Well, there were some people that had
They had a house
on built by on a similar just single road development.
Yeah.
And we looked at that, and it was the
which
same.
they invited us to go and look at their house.
Except they had.
They could choose whether they had I think they had a blue bathroom.
Well, I don't know about that, but they had a coal-fire central heating, you know, for boiler.
Right.
But
Ours was warm air central heating.
Ours was warm air, kept for gas.
Warm air.
And it's quite very good. Like that, you won't remember it, I don't suppose.
I can barely remember that house. I remember
it was ever so
front room, very
the warm air central, and a lot of built-in things were useful. Warm air central heating means you've got a boiler. The boiler was in the kitchen, but there were no radiators because there were literally ducts under the floor.
That was the only thing, wasn't it?
And immediately above that on the landing was a linen cupboard. It hadn't officially got any heating in it.
Yeah, the vents coming out.
But of course it kept very dry, which was ever so useful.
They had an airing cupboard in the bathroom
and there was a little airing cupboard in the bathroom which had
Right,
a little tiny tube with
let's
heating.
move on.
So Dad was commuting to London all that time, was he?
Yeah.
Yes, well, I told you I used to meet him off the train and outside where
The granary.
where the granary is.
Yeah. And then you didn't go straight back to work after Joan was born?
No, I was teaching. Let's see. I was teaching at Twiddle when Joan was. I left Twiddle as Joan was going to be born any minute.
Right.
And in fact, wasn't expecting to go back for when she was a baby. But then she was born but my mum deliberately retired when she heard that I was expecting. She wanted to have a hand in it. And so she found out if she'd get a decent pension if she retired then. So she literally retired as Joan was born. I mean,
Yeah,
officially
yeah.
it would have been the 31st of August, 1970, she retired.
Mm.
She'd been a head at Rainham Church of England Infant School for 17 years then. She got the headship whilst I was at school in Fort Pitt in 1953.
Right.
And she, so I say she retired. I've actually got a newspaper cutting of her,
Oh, right.
of her when she retired.
Right.
But and then round about Easter, after Joan was born, Clemens was 71, Mrs. Middlemass, who was the local staffing officer, phoned me and said, how do you feel about a bit of supply? And I said, well, where is it? Because obviously I'd have to do something with this here baby. She said, oh, well, that's the thing. It's at Hempstead. And your mother lived at Hempstead. And when she retired, we asked if she would, sort of stand in for somebody who was off sick or something, or do any supply. And she said no, but she'd look after the baby so that I could. She hadn't told me that. She told Mrs. Middlemass that.
Okay.
And
So how did you come to decide to move to, I mean, it wasn't initially Faversham, but ended up being Faversham, which was 1976.
Well, we didn't intend to move there at all.
we weren't intending to move to
Really?
Faversham at all.
Grandma needed someone to...
Let me.
I've got them.
No, my mum was getting a bit of a liability. She still lived in Hempstead on her own. And she was a bit of a liability because she was driving then. She turned up just about every day.
Right.
And at the house, I mean, she did look after, sort of look after Joan.
Joan, yeah.
But not full time. I mean, I didn't do any full time teaching. I just did the time that she could cope with.
So what year did you start looking to move?
And
So we moved 1976.
we actually moved 76, but in fact, we'd been, my mum couldn't do to be on her own out there really in that 3-bedroom house in Hempstead. So a suggestion was we bought something where she could have her own flat. I mean, you couldn't live with her. You'd probably say that about me, but she'd been organising people all her life, and you've probably heard the story about when she was expecting me. My grandma heard that she was going to be in hospital for, I think it was a fortnight when I was born. And she said, poor little beggar, she'll have her a life organised up till she's 21 by the time you get home. And so we looked for somewhere that had a granny annex.
Mm.
We wouldn't have been able to call it that for her either.
Yeah.
And
We had one in Hartley Hill, didn't we?
we found one, a house that had got a flat. It was an annex, a sort of bit next
Built on.
that was, I think it was built on. The house, in fact, was to look at very much the same sort of age and things and similar to look at to our house in Sheffield. My mum liked that. And we made an offer for it and were seriously thinking of buying that.
Well, the offer was accepted, wasn't it?
And then
Apply for a mortgage.
and then it fell through. But my mum had worked out she wouldn't have room for those wardrobes of hers that we had in
Big old ones, yeah.
And other furniture.
the big well, we had 2 wardrobes and the tall boys that went with them, all of which Joan now has. And she decided there was no way she'd have room for them in this flat, this annex that house had. So she put an advert in the paper for them. But she didn't want to risk dealers coming out to Hempstead, so she kindly put, without asking us, put our telephone number.
And people were saying, what phone out saying, what?
And people, you know, and somebody, and then say that one fell through, and then people were still phoning, somebody phoned up, and I don't know, I like the sound of the voice I explained, I'm sorry, they're not necessarily for sale anymore, because and said we were moving into a house with an annex, and there wasn't going to be, with my mother, we were selling our house and our bungalow, our house and her house, and buying a house with a which had an annex, but there wasn't room for these. So said that sale's fallen through, so we can't, they're not necessarily for sale anymore. So this person said, I've got a friend that's got a house that's what you want. And that was Samandra.
Wow.
Do you want me to give you her telephone number? Of course, their granny annex was the top floor. The grandma had bought that house with them. It was newly built, just about as 72. And she'd had some of the, I think she'd had the utility room and things like, and some other things.
Top floor, yeah.
What built on, you mean?
Yes, I think she'd had some of the conversion done.
Right.
That made it, I mean, we in fact added to that, sort of had new windows and things like that when we were, after we'd been there a while, but to get to their grandma was younger than ours, and she decided she wanted to be on her own. She didn't, because she didn't in fact have a proper flat. She just had the top floor as a living room and sitting and bedroom, but that's all.
There was no toilet because you put the toilet in, didn't you?
We did, for you.
Yeah.
Because that's 2 reasons why we did different things with it from her, because she was moving out because, she was a bit miffed because Mrs. Pete, she was called, the Lewises were the family, but because in fact that where the toilet on that floor we had put in was a sort of built-in cupboard up between the bedroom and the loft, and it was, I think it was just before Easter. She got things had. She got their Easter eggs hidden in there or something like that.
Okay.
And but I asked if we could look at it because at that stage somebody here was nearly 4.
Mm.
And there were 2 full flights, as you may remember. There were 2 full flights of stairs. It wasn't just a loft. They were, well, that's why my mum it wouldn't have been suitable for my mum. I mean, she turned 70 as we moved.
Mm.
That year we moved. And she wouldn't have, it wouldn't have been suitable for her to have that, just that top floor, those 2 flights of stairs. Well, at that stage, Mary was nearly 4. She turned 4 just after we moved, you know, a couple of months after we moved, literally. And as I used to get her up, when we went to bed, I used to get her up and take her to the toilet. Because, which of course was easy in Farnham Close because we slept on the floor the bathroom was on. And she was always a big baby.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no way was I going to take her downstairs to the bathroom. When we went, just as we went to bed. So it worked out if we could have a toilet on just off the bedroom the girls would have, then that was handy for there. So that's why we had that toilet put in. And because my mum, we had the top floor for our bedroom, and they had bunk beds in the, because we had bunk beds at Farnham Close, and so they had the bunk beds in the little bedroom there, and my mum had the middle floor as her flat virtually. She had what would have been originally two main bedrooms as her bedroom and sitting room. In the one we had last as our bedroom before we left Faversham, was her sitting room. And the smaller bedroom we made into, at the side, we made into a full kitchen for her, so that she could do her own meals where she wanted to and such like. And the other smaller bedroom we had as a spare bedroom if we had visitors, but
so what year did she die? In 1982?
82, yes. September, early September 82, she died.
So did she have dementia?
not officially.
Right.
No, they didn't call it that in those days. I think that's an unkind name. I mean, she was definitely getting...
She was quite confused, wasn't she?
Yes.
The last time, yeah, she kept passing out.
Yes, every now and again, she would, for the last... As I say, we moved to Faversham in 1976, and for the last couple of years she would every now and again she'd say, I feel dizzy, and flake out. And she, in fact, I don't know whether it was the first time or one of the first times, she was at the age concern thing in Faversham, and I, praise the Lord, was actually at the time teaching at the district, doing some supply at the district infant school, which was just next door to there practically. It was ever so near. And even more fortunately, one of the people who volunteered there also happened to be one of the cleaners at the district infants. Well, you know what I am for talking to everybody. So they knew that this woman knew that I was at the district infants, and my mum, as I did, one of her flaked out and was taken to, I think she was taken to Canterbury, A&E, and somebody came in and informed, told Miss Smith, who was the head of the district infants at that time, and she said, you go, which I thought was lovely of her actually. She really was. She wasn't really that keen on teaching, wasn't Miss Smith? But she was a nice person to work for, and she took over the class. She said, "You go," and I went to the hospital.
So your mum died in 82.
Yes.
Was she 75, 76?
She would have been 76 a couple of months later, because...
Right.
No. Yes, that's right. Yes, because she was born in 1906.
We had to take her on holiday every time we went, didn't we? And
how many times did she come on holiday with us? Because I was trying to think about that.
how many times?
Did she come every time when we went, from when she moved to Faversham?
Not quite every time. We had on
one
occasion we got
holidays,
somebody to stay. She went on holidays with Saga. She herself went on one or two, but not necessarily at the same time as, because we've got postcards that...
When we went to Yarmouth, she stayed
in the little hotel just down the road from the campsite.
Yeah, because that was 1981, wasn't it?
Yes, because we've got pictures of him asleep outside our tent with somebody with a television in the back of their van watching Charles and Diana's wedding.
I remember, because I watched
I was fast asleep.
Yeah.
With my mouth open probably. Yeah. And she ended up in hospital then, didn't she, when we...
Yes.
But there wasn't that the holiday when we had 1 week of Nanny and Grandad and 1 week...
That's right.
Grandma.
She came and she stayed in that hotel just...
So how did she get home? Did she get the train?
Must have gone home the train, mustn't she?
I can't remember, because she...
Nanny
She
and
came
Granddad-
with us.
We
Nanny
didn't
and
take her
Granddad
home,
didn't
did we?
come with us, did they?
We didn't take her home because we were still there.
No, they came by train,
Right.
but
Because didn't Nanny end up in the hospital there?
Yeah,
as
same
well?
hospital.
in the same hospital.
Yeah.
Yes, in, where was it? Just along,
Axminster.
no, it wasn't
It was
Axminster.
somewhere, it was in Devon, when I was born in Devon.
It was just over, it was sort of the nearest small hospital there.
Yeah, she just passed out on the beach,
Right.
Grandma. She was sitting on a deck chair, and we went to speak to her, and she was
She'd passed out.
Mm.
and she also was, we found out she was allergic to frozen vegetables, because she always said she was allergic to mushrooms, but I think it was
But
vegetables.
we think it must have been the, because she'd eaten mushrooms before that. It was
Yeah.
only,
And
it was the same time. She'd, when she used to, she belonged to the, when she, after she retired, so this is 70 to 76. She belonged to the Business and Professional Women's Club. She also, incidentally, before that, belonged to the Head Teachers Association and used to go to conferences and things, special. In fact, before I was married, I used to take her to some of these things. If the subject was, of the whatever it was interesting, I got to go to them. I mean, I wasn't a head teacher, but there's one I will never forget, which I'm very glad to have had the opportunity of going to. It was at Sevenoaks. There was a school just outside Sevenoaks that was one that was used for some of these head teachers associations and things, conferences, or they called them. I mean, they didn't confer, but they had speakers and they had sort of little groups where they talked and that sort of thing. And the subject was books. And there were 3 speakers due to be there. One was a writer of children's books, and one was a writer of textbooks, and one was a publisher of school books, I think. Well, the publishers, I think he couldn't come. But it was a very good opportunity, because the writer of children's fiction was Philippa Pierce, who wrote Tom's Midnight Garden, A Dog So Small, that sort of thing. And I got to hear the principle on which he wrote those, in fact. You know, it was quite interesting. She, you know, a child that was in a position where they had no companions, or were sort of a bit lonely and a bit in a rather difficult situation, and the imagination that of the story of the sort of giving them companionship, really. And even more interesting to me, in fact, was R.J. Hempstead was the writer of textbooks who wrote history, which I had used quite a lot and found very good, in fact, because he always based his from cavemen to Vikings was, and from, let's see, he did once for each sort of generation, if you like, the Normans and one.
So we probably need to move along a bit.
But we were in Seven Oaks, and he said people teach as if everybody lived in caves. And where did they find the caves around here? You know, he based his books entirely on what we knew. You know, what we really know and what you could find from things that had genuinely been found, which...
So when we moved to Faversham,
Yes.
you went straight to the Gospel Mission.
Yeah.
Did you?
Well, actually Grandad found that.
Was
because
that quite a change from Twiddle, was it?
It was a lot of a change from Twiddle, because, well, the thing was, we'd been to Twiddle, which was Brethren, and
Very open, brethren.
very open Brethren, not strict in any way, but pretty solid Bible based in those days. It's heard since then. But in fact, before we moved, as we were moving, about to move, we went to some meetings, or a meeting at Cypress Road, which was the
Gospel Hall.
Brethren, the Gospel Hall in Faversham, and talked to somebody that...
It was their annual conference, well, it was only one we went to.
Yeah, and they said, we said we were moving. Did we both go?
Yeah. You didn't go.
I didn't go to all of it, I don't
You didn't
think.
go to the meeting. You took Auntie, your mum, and Auntie, not, Uncle Fred's wife, I think it was.
Auntie Ellen?
I think it was to show around Faversham. I was showing around Faversham, and I went to the meeting, and someone said to me, "You're staying to." You came to meet me at it afterwards, and someone said you were going to stay to tea, and I said, "Well, we've not all been to the meeting, so it's not fair if we stay to tea." He said, "Oh, that's all right, that's all right." And so we stayed to tea, and this man sat opposite us. I can't remember his name now, but it was
Fred Epps?
No, it wasn't Fred Epps. It was the one that was baptised. The one that was Jonathan's teacher when he was baptised. He spoke at Jonathan's baptism, and he was a scripture teacher at the school, and he was sitting opposite me and chatting away, and sitting opposite us, and the Fred Epps came around serving cups of tea and things, and he said, "Fred, this family was just moving to Faversham, just thinking about moving to Faversham." He said, "Oh yeah," and then walked away, and I thought, well, if that's all the welcome we're going to get, we're not going here. But also people at Old Church said, "You won't like it there," and they said they won't accept you there.
So we went to the Gospel Mission where...
Well, we had great difficulty finding somewhere, but just after we moved, Nanny and Grandad stayed with us actually. I think Grandad sort of saw the Gospel Mission, and
Yeah, that's what we're trying. We went there.
and so we tried it, and
We shouldn't have stayed there, but there was nowhere else in Faversham, and Mum didn't want to go outside Faversham, so we went there for a while.
it's not that I objected to the travelling, it's just that I think you should, where possible, go to the nearest sound place.
Yeah.
And it was with Mr. What was his name? Ransom. It was. He was pretty sound.
Was he? I can't remember. So obviously I was converted under his ministry.
He was. Yes. All right.